I have a piece in front of me from McClatchy News Service. This activity by the Internal Revenue Service is notorious, it's diabolical, and it's spreading. A group of anti-abortion activists in Iowa had to promise the Internal Revenue Service it wouldn't picket in front of a Planned Parenthood. Catherine Engelbrecht's family and business in Texas were audited by the government, as you know, after her voting rights group sought tax-exempt status from the IRS. Retired military veteran Mark Drabick of Nebraska became active in and donated to conservative causes. Then he found the IRS challenging his church donations. While the developing scandal over the targeting of conservatives by the tax agency is largely focused to date on its scrutiny of groups with the words such as Tea Party or Patriot or Constitution in their names, these examples suggest the government was looking at a broader array of conservative groups and perhaps individuals. Their collective experiences, at a minimum, could spread skepticism about the fairness of a powerful agency that should be above reproach and at worst could point to a secret political vendetta within the government against conservatives. We have now found out that 5 Jewish groups that supported Israel but opposed the administration's position in the Middle East were targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. We've now found that certain Christian and evangelical groups were targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. We have found hundreds of Tea Party and otherwise conservative groups targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. And what's being suggested now by McClatchy is that individuals had their personal income tax filings targeted also by the Internal Revenue Service based on their free speech, based on their political views. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought the old Soviet Union was dead, but I'm wrong. It's right there in the Internal Revenue Service. It's unbelievable. Sue Martinek of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, already knows what happened to her and others involved in the Coalition for Life of Iowa. She first sought tax-exempt status for the group in 2008, maintaining contact by mail and phone with a woman identified only as Ms. Richards in the Cincinnati office of the IRS that's now at the center of the problem. Martinek said the woman never offered a first name. A woman's voice on a recording at her phone number doesn't give a name, and messages left by McClatchy brought no response. Richards told Martinek by phone in early 2009 the group's application had been approved, but Richards added a condition. Board members first needed to sign a letter promising not to picket in front of Planned Parenthood. It is so crucially important the entirety of what the Internal Revenue Service was doing be exposed. It is so crucially important to educate our fellow Americans about what tyranny looks like. To cut through the Obama crap, to cut through the crap from the Democrats on like Harry Reid and so forth, it's crucially important, which is why it needs to be done right. And it's not going to be done right with 5 committee chairmen tripping over each other and obstruction taking place in the executive branch. Oh, we'll get some information, and some will be very interesting. And the nerds over at the editorial page at the Wall Street Journal can write a few paragraphs. That'll excite them. But this is about more than that, ladies and gentlemen. Much more. This article, which we will post, goes on and on about different individuals. And, you know, this is only beginning to get reported. Individuals who dared to participate in the political system. Individuals who dared to speak out, to make contributions, to join organizations. I mean, this is just stunning. Over a year ago, I mentioned this to you in early March when we were first approached at Landmark Legal Foundation. The people we spoke to told us that they weren't being taken seriously by members of Congress. The press were mocking them to the extent the press covered any of it. Our problem was folks didn't want to come forward and use their names, and they didn't want us to make the information they had provided to us available. So after a couple of weeks of persuasion and assurances that it would be okay, our lawyers at Landmark Legal Foundation were a very small group. We're very efficient. We don't waste a lot of money on office space. I've got fellas in there and a young lady in there who just work hard every day, sometimes into the night, often on the weekends. I view us as sort of a legal special forces team. A small, effective operation. We've been doing this now since 1976. I've been doing it for over 20 years. And now you know why I won't surrender it, why I continue to do it. And I'll tell you what, folks, maybe I shouldn't, but I will. I tell you everything. Landmark Legal Foundation operates on a very thin budget. And I'm concerned for conservative groups like ours that really do take it to abusive agencies, abusive departments, abusive individuals in the federal government and so forth. Because donations are down. They're down. You see, I had Stuart Taylor on here last hour, and he was explaining billions of dollars in Obamacare, just like there's billions of dollars in every one of their damn programs in Washington, to subsidize the left, to subsidize their ethnic groups, these front groups that they set up, la this and la that, to subsidize their community activists, to subsidize their think tanks. On our side, we don't take a penny from the government, local, state, or federal. Not a penny. And so it's constantly hand in hand. And yet I look at what we've done, and other groups too. I look at what we've done over the last few years. Fought this administration all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States on Obamacare. Fought this administration all the way to the Supreme Court on its violations of the 10th Amendment and the immigration laws involving Arizona, among other states. Fought this administration, and still are, on the unconstitutional appointments to the National Labor Relations Board. And won. In constant hand-to-hand brutal combat with the Environmental Protection Agency, which has lawyers up the wazoo, which uses lawyers out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. When it gets to the appellate level, they use lawyers that come straight out of the solicitor's office at the Justice Department, and I have 6 of us. That's it. That's it. And yet, when things like this break, when finally we and others are able to bring this stuff to the fore, I have to read editorials like in the Wall Street Journal. They've done nothing. They sit there and they write. We don't need a special prosecutor. We just need Congress to get more information, when over a year ago Congress did next to nothing. They could have held these hearings. They didn't. They wouldn't, for the reasons I've said. Because they don't like the Tea Party. They don't like evangelicals. They don't like conservatives. So they didn't do it before the election. They didn't want to harm Romney. They didn't want to create a spectacle. And even now, other than Ted Cruz or 2 or 3 or 4 others, what's the end game here? A few more editorials in the Wall Street Journal? That's not enough.